Thomas Reeves wiped the sweat from his brow as a transport shuttle descended to the lavender atmosphere of Tavros Prime. Below him stretched an alien landscape of crystalline forests and floating gardens, connected by bridges of light that defied Earth's physics. 6 months ago, he had been a simple systems engineer in New Detroit. Now he found himself responding to emergency calls from alien nobility, whose technology made human engineering look like children playing with blocks. The shuttle touched down in a courtyard paved with stones that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Thomas gathered his equipment cases and stepped out into air that tasted faintly of copper and sweetness. Servants moved around him with fluid grace, their movements synchronized like a dance he didn't know the steps to. They were tall, slender beings with skin in shades of pearl and opal, their eyes large and luminous. A figure approached him with measured steps. The man wore robes of deep burgundy trimmed with silver thread that caught the light from 3 suns overhead. His skin was pale blue, his features sharp and aristocratic. "You are the human engineer," the man said. His voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed without question. "Thomas Reeves," he replied, extending his hand before remembering that handshakes weren't universal. He lowered it awkwardly. "I received an urgent transmission about system failures. I am Dorian, Chief Steward of House Tavros. Lady Seraphine awaits you in the receiving hall. Follow me and do not wander. This estate holds secrets not meant for outsider eyes." Thomas followed the steward through corridors that seemed to shift and shimmer. The walls were not solid, but appeared to be made of contained energy, pulsing with soft colors that changed with their passage. Artwork that might have been paintings or might have been living creatures hung in alcoves. The wealth on display could have funded a dozen Earth colonies. They entered a vast hall with a ceiling that opened to sky. At the far end, seated on a throne that floated 3 feet above the floor, was Lady Seraphine. Thomas forgot to breathe. She was unlike any being he had ever seen. Her skin was liquid silver, actually moving across her body like mercury, reflecting light in ways that made her seem to glow from within. Her hair fell in waves of midnight blue shot, through with threads of actual starlight. But it was her eyes that captured him, violet irises with depths that seemed to hold entire galaxies. She wore a gown that appeared to be woven from light itself, shifting between deep purple and silver as she moved. "The human has arrived, my lady," Dorian announced. Seraphine rose from her throne and descended the steps with a grace that made Thomas think of water flowing downhill. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, and every movement spoke of power barely contained. When she reached the floor, she circled Thomas slowly, studying him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. Her voice was like music played on instruments Thomas had never heard, with harmonics that resonated in his chest. "The report said humans were formidable. You look rather ordinary." "I get the job done," Thomas replied, meeting her gaze despite the way it made his heart race. "That's what matters." A smile touched her lips, brief as a shooting star. "Confidence. How refreshing. Most humans who enter my presence can barely string words together." "Most humans probably aren't here to fix your broken systems," Thomas said. "Speaking of which, I'll need access to your power distribution network, environmental controls, and communication arrays. The message said you've had 3 critical failures in 4 days. 4 failures in 5 days now," Seraphine corrected. "The latest occurred this morning. My physicians assure me another such disruption could damage the life support systems in the East Wing. 50 servants live there." Thomas frowned. Life support shouldn't be linked to the same grid as general power. That's a design flaw. "Or," Seraphine said quietly, stepping closer until Thomas could smell her scent, like ozone and night blooming flowers. "It is intentional. I did not summon you only to repair systems. Thomas Reeves. I believe someone is sabotaging my house." The courtyard had emptied while they spoke. Even Dorian had withdrawn to a discreet distance. Thomas realized he was alone with one of the most powerful beings on this world, and she was standing close enough that he could see flecks of silver swimming in her violet eyes like stars in a nebula. "If that's true," Thomas said, "then fixing your systems won't solve the problem. I'll need to find out who's doing it and why." That is exactly what I require. Seraphine turned and walked toward a door that hadn't been visible moments before. She paused at the threshold and looked back over her shoulder. Come, we will discuss this in my private study, where we cannot be overheard. There are things you need to understand about the politics of my house, and I find myself curious about the human who dares to meet my eyes. Thomas picked up his equipment cases and followed her through the door into a corridor lit by bioluminescent plants growing from the walls. His logical mind told him he should be cautious, that he was in unknown territory surrounded by aliens whose customs he barely understood. But another part of him, a part he usually kept buried beneath professionalism and caution, whispered that he would follow this silver-skinned woman anywhere she asked him to go. The door sealed behind him with a sound like a sigh, and Thomas knew that nothing in his life would ever be quite the same again. The private study of Lady Seraphine was unlike anything Thomas had expected. Instead of the cold, formal space he imagined an alien noblewoman would maintain, the room felt almost intimate. The walls were transparent, offering a view of gardens that floated on platforms of condensed light. Strange flowers bloomed in colors that didn't exist in Earth's spectrum, and small creatures that looked like living jewels flitted between the petals. Seraphine gestured to a chair that molded itself to Thomas's body as he sat. She took her own seat across from him, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. 3 weeks ago, Seraphine began, my younger brother challenged my right to lead House Tavros. He claimed I was too weak, too sympathetic to lesser species. The Council of Houses rejected his claim, but he has allies, powerful ones who would benefit from seeing me fail. Thomas set down his diagnostic tablet, and a series of catastrophic system failures would make you look incompetent. Precisely. Seraphine leaned forward, and the light from the gardens cast shifting patterns across her silver skin. But I cannot accuse my own brother without proof. Family betrayal is taken seriously in our culture. False accusations would cost me everything. So you need someone from outside your political structure, Thomas said. Someone who can investigate without raising suspicion. A human engineer called to fix technical problems. Seraphine's smile was slight, but genuine. Who would suspect him of being anything more? Thomas stood and walked to the transparent wall, studying the gardens below. I'll need complete access. Everywhere. If I'm going to find evidence, I can't have locked doors or forbidden areas. Done. He turned to find Seraphine had risen as well and was standing just behind him. Up close, he could see that her silver skin wasn't smooth but textured with infinitely small patterns, like circuit boards made of starlight. Her scent was stronger here, intoxicating in a way that made his thoughts scatter. Why do you really want my help? Thomas asked. You could hire investigators from your own people. Why trust a human? Seraphine reached out and touched his face, her fingers cool against his skin. Because everyone on this world wants something from me. Power, status, alliances through marriage. But you looked at me in the receiving hall, and I saw no calculation in your eyes. Only curiosity and something else. Something I have not seen directed at me in a very long time. What's that? Thomas's voice came out rougher than he intended. Desire without agenda. Seraphine withdrew her hand but didn't step back. You wanted me, Thomas Reeves. Not my title, not my wealth. Just me. When was the last time you think someone desired me for myself alone? Before Thomas could answer, an alarm pierced the air. Seraphine's expression shifted instantly from vulnerable to commanding. She touched a panel on her wrist, and a holographic display sprang into existence. The West Power Junction, she said. Come. They ran through corridors that blurred past them. Seraphine moved with inhuman speed, and Thomas struggled to keep pace. They descended 3 levels and burst into a chamber filled with humming machinery. Smoke poured from a control panel, and sparks cascaded from severed conduits. Get back! Thomas shouted, dropping his equipment and pulling out his emergency kit. He could see the problem immediately. Someone had overloaded the primary capacitors, forcing them to discharge all at once. If the secondary systems failed, the entire western quarter of the estate would lose power, including the medical facilities. He worked with desperate speed, rerouting power through backup channels, isolating the damaged sections, and stabilizing the core systems. Seraphine stood behind him, calling out readings from her wrist display. Her voice calm despite the danger. A support beam above them groaned. Thomas looked up to see metal beginning to warp from the heat. It was going to collapse directly onto Seraphine. He didn't think. He lunged forward, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pulled her backward. They hit the floor together, just as the beam crashed down where she had been standing. The impact sent a shockwave through the chamber, and more equipment exploded in showers of sparks. Thomas found himself lying on top of Seraphine, his body covering hers protectively. Her eyes were wide with surprise, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her silver skin felt warm now, almost hot, and he realized that her people's physiology responded to adrenaline the same way humans did. "You saved my life," she whispered. "You hired me to fix things," Thomas replied, though he made no move to get up. "Seemed counterproductive to let you die." Seraphine's hand came up to rest against his chest, right over his racing heart. "You are not what I expected, Thomas Reeves. Neither are you, Lady Seraphine." The smoke was clearing. Emergency systems were kicking in, dousing flames and ventilating the chamber. Thomas knew they should move, should investigate the damage, should start looking for evidence. But for this moment, lying here with this extraordinary woman in his arms, he couldn't bring himself to care about any of that. "I want to show you something," Seraphine said softly. "Tonight, when the twin moons rise, will you meet me?" "Where?" "The Garden of Whispers. Dorian will bring you when the time is right." She smiled, and it transformed her face from merely beautiful to absolutely breathtaking. "Wear something other than your work clothes, please. This will not be a professional meeting." Thomas felt his pulse quicken. "And what kind of meeting will it be?" "The kind where we stop pretending there is nothing between us." They helped each other to their feet. Thomas's professional mind cataloged the damage around them, while another part of his brain tried to process what just happened and what was about to happen. He had come to this world expecting a simple repair job, maybe a week of work at most. Now he was involved in political intrigue, assassination attempts, and something far more dangerous than any of that. He was falling for an alien noblewoman who could probably destroy him with a single word to the right people. The smart thing would be to keep his distance, maintain professionalism, finish the job, and leave. But as Seraphine touched his hand in farewell, her violet eyes promising things that made his breath catch, Thomas realized he had never been very good at doing the smart thing. That evening, Dorian came to Thomas's guest quarters carrying a bundle of cloth. The steward's expression was carefully neutral, but Thomas thought he detected a hint of disapproval in the set of his shoulders. "Lady Seraphine requests your presence," Dorian said, laying out what appeared to be formal attire tailored to Thomas's measurements. "The Garden of Whispers is a sacred place. You will show proper respect." Thomas studied the clothing. It was made from fabric that seemed to absorb and reflect light like Seraphine's skin, deep blue with silver threading. How did she know my size? "My lady knows many things." Dorian turned to leave, then paused. "A word of advice, human. Lady Seraphine is beloved by her people. Whatever games you think you are playing, remember that her happiness matters more than your life." The threat was clear, but Thomas found he couldn't resent it. "I have no intention of hurting her." Intentions mean little. Results are what matter. After Dorian left, Thomas dressed in the alien clothing. It fit perfectly, moving with him like a second skin. He looked at himself in the reflective wall panel and barely recognized the man staring back. He looked like he belonged in this world of light and impossible beauty. Dorian returned and led him through the estate in silence. They moved through corridors Thomas hadn't seen before, ascending levels that seemed to exist outside normal space. Finally, they emerged into a garden suspended in the night sky. The Garden of Whispers floated on a platform of pure energy, surrounded by nothing but stars and the glow of the twin moons rising on the horizon. Flowers that bloomed only at night released perfume that made Thomas's head spin. Water flowed upward in defiance of gravity, forming spirals and patterns that sang with soft musical notes. And in the center of it all stood Seraphine. She had changed from her formal robes into something simpler, a gown of midnight blue that left her silver shoulders bare. Her starlight hair hung loose around her face, and she wore no jewelry or symbols of rank. She looked young and uncertain, and more beautiful than anything Thomas had ever seen. "You came," she said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped." She walked toward him, her bare feet silent on the luminescent grass. But hope and certainty are different things. They stood facing each other while the twin moons rose higher, bathing the garden in silver and gold light. Music seemed to come from the flowers themselves, a melody without words that spoke of longing and possibility. "I should not want this," Seraphine said. "You are human. I am of House Tavros. There are customs, expectations, political considerations. And yet—" Thomas stepped closer. "And yet when I am near you, all of those things feel distant and unimportant." She reached up and touched his face again, tracing the line of his jaw. "You make me feel seen, Thomas. Not as Lady Seraphine, ruler of House Tavros, but simply as myself. Do you know how rare that is?" Thomas covered her hand with his own. "I'm just an engineer. I fix broken things." "Then perhaps you can fix what is broken in me." He drew her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against his. "There's nothing broken about you. You barely know me. Then let me learn." Seraphine smiled, and it was like watching a sunrise. "Yes," she whispered. "Let us learn each other." When their lips met, Thomas felt something shift in the universe. Her mouth was soft and eager, tasting of alien spices and something uniquely her. She kissed him with an intensity that spoke of long-suppressed desires, of lonely nights in a position of power that allowed no weakness. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Seraphine's silver skin had taken on a faint glow, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Thomas could feel his own heart hammering against his ribs. "Stay with me tonight," Seraphine said. "Not in my official chambers where servants would gossip. Here in the garden, where we could be simply ourselves." Thomas knew this was a turning point. Whatever happened next would change everything between them. But as he looked into her violet eyes and saw the same hunger and hope he felt reflected there, he found he didn't care about consequences. "Yes," he said. They sank down together onto the soft grass, and the Garden of Whispers lived up to its name, keeping their secrets as the twin moons climbed higher and the stars wheeled overhead. Thomas woke to the sensation of sunlight on his face and the weight of Seraphine's head on his chest. The twin moons had set, and the three suns of Tavros Prime were rising in sequence, painting the sky in shades of amber, rose, and violet. In the morning light, Seraphine's silver skin had taken on a golden tint, and her hair spread across his shoulder like spilled ink laced with diamonds. For a moment, he let himself simply exist in this perfect instant, holding an alien woman who had somehow become the center of his universe in just 2 days. Then reality intruded in the form of his diagnostic tablet, chiming urgently from where he had left it in his quarters. Seraphine stirred, her eyes opening to reveal those impossible violet depths. She smiled up at him, and Thomas felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. "Good morning," she murmured. "Is it?" Thomas asked. "I imagine there will be consequences to this." Seraphine sat up, unashamed of her bare silver skin in the morning light. "There are always consequences to happiness. The question is whether they are worth paying." Before Thomas could respond, Dorian's voice echoed through the garden from a communication panel. "My lady, your presence is required immediately. There has been another incident." Seraphine's expression hardened. She rose and gestured, causing her gown to reassemble itself around her body through some technology Thomas couldn't fathom. "What happened?" "The central data vault has been breached. Records have been accessed and altered." Thomas was already on his feet, his mind racing. "The data vault, that's where you keep records of all transactions, communications, everything that could be used as evidence." "Evidence of sabotage," Seraphine said grimly. "Whoever is behind this is covering their tracks. Come, we must see what damage has been done." They ran through the estate together, no longer bothering to hide their connection. Servants stared as Lady Seraphine and the human engineer passed, moving as one unit. Thomas noticed the looks, some curious, some disapproving, but he was too focused on the problem to care. The data vault was in chaos. Technicians stood helplessly before displays showing corrupted files and severed data streams. At the center of it all stood Dorian, his expression neutral as always, but Thomas noticed the steward's hands were clenched into fists. "Show me," Seraphine commanded. One of the technicians brought up a display. "The intrusion occurred at dawn, my lady. Someone with high-level access codes entered the system and systematically altered records dating back 6 months." Thomas pushed forward, studying the data. His training let him see patterns others might miss. This wasn't random. Whoever did this knew exactly what files to target. Look at the timestamps. They spent longest on records related to power system maintenance and supply shipments. "Why those specifically?" Seraphine asked. "Because those would show the purchase of components that could be used for sabotage." Thomas pulled up another screen. "See this? 3 months ago, someone ordered capacitors rated for 10 times the normal power load. Those are the same components that failed yesterday, the ones that nearly killed you." "Who placed the order?" Seraphine demanded. The technician's face paled. "The access codes belong to Dorian, my lady." Every eye in the room turned to the steward. Dorian's expression didn't change, but Thomas saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, surprise. "I placed no such order," Dorian said calmly. "Your codes were used," the technician insisted. Thomas stepped forward, his mind working through the puzzle. "May I see the access logs for the past week?" Seraphine nodded. The technician brought up the requested data, and Thomas studied it intently. Then he started to smile. "What is it?" Seraphine asked. "Dorian's access codes were used to place that order 3 months ago," Thomas said. "But look at the login location. It came from the East Wing Medical Facility." "I have never been to the medical facility," Dorian stated. "Exactly, but I know who has." Thomas pulled up another set of records. "Your brother, Seraphine. He was treated there for a minor injury 3 months ago. And look at this. Someone else accessed Dorian's codes this morning to alter the records. The login came from the guest quarters in the diplomatic wing." Seraphine's eyes widened. "The diplomatic wing. My brother is hosting Ambassador Krenel from House Vorten. They have been meeting privately for days." "Planning your downfall," Thomas said. "Your brother sabotages the estate, makes you look incompetent. House Vorten is your rival in the council, correct? They would benefit from your fall." "But we still have no proof," Dorian said quietly. "Accusations without evidence are worse than silence." Thomas grinned. "That's where you're wrong. Whoever altered the records this morning didn't know that I spent last night installing secondary logging protocols in all major systems. I told Seraphine I needed complete access, and I used it. Every data transaction from the past 12 hours has been recorded on a separate system that no one else knows exists." He pulled out his personal tablet and brought up the hidden logs. There, clear as day, was evidence of someone using stolen codes to access the vault. And more importantly, the log showed what files had been altered and what they originally contained. Purchase orders for sabotage components. Communications between your brother and House Vorten discussing the timeline of failures. Even messages detailing how they plan to use your death to trigger a succession crisis that would benefit them both. Thomas looked at Seraphine. "This is everything you need." Seraphine's face was unreadable. She took the tablet and studied the evidence in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Summon my brother and Ambassador Krenel to the Hall of Judgment. Gather the full household. This ends now." The next hour passed in a blur. Thomas stood beside Seraphine as her people assembled. Her brother, Theron, arrived with the arrogant confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. Ambassador Krenel looked annoyed at being summoned so publicly. Seraphine presented the evidence without emotion, letting the data speak for itself. Thomas watched as Theron's face went from confident to pale to desperate. The ambassador tried to deny involvement, but the communications were clear. "You betrayed our house," Seraphine said to her brother. Her voice was steady, but Thomas could hear the pain beneath it. "You endanger our people. You attempted to murder me. For what? Ambition? You were making us weak." Theron shouted. "Your sympathy for lesser species, your refusal to take what is rightfully ours. House Tavros was once feared. Under you, we have become soft. No, Seraphine said quietly. Under me, we have become better. And that is precisely why you will never lead our house. She turned to the assembled crowd. By right of evidence and authority, I strip Theron of all rank and title. He will be exiled from Tavros Prime. Ambassador Krenel, you will return to House Vorton in disgrace. This attempted conspiracy will be reported to the council. Theron lunged forward, but guards restrained him. As they dragged him away, his eyes locked on Thomas with pure hatred. This is your doing, human. You corrupted her. No, Seraphine said, stepping in front of Thomas protectively. He saved me. From you. From my own isolation. From the belief that power required loneliness. He gave me something far more valuable than evidence. He gave me hope. The hall erupted in whispers. Seraphine raised her hand for silence. I know what you're all thinking. A human, and one of our kind. It is unconventional. It violates traditions. But I have learned something these past days. Tradition without wisdom is merely stubbornness. And wisdom tells me that connection, true connection, is rare enough that when we find it, we should cherish it regardless of where it comes from. She turned to Thomas and took his hand in front of everyone. Thomas Reeves, you came to my house as a hired engineer, but you have become something far more important. You have become the person who sees me, all of me, and chooses to stay anyway. If you are willing, I would have you remain here, not as my employee, but as my partner in all things. Thomas felt every eye in the hall on him. This was it, the moment where he could return to his simple life on Earth, or step fully into a world of complexity, politics, and challenges he couldn't begin to imagine. He looked at Seraphine, at the hope and vulnerability in her violet eyes, and realized it was never really a choice. I'll need better access to your systems, he said with a slight smile. Can't have them failing again. Seraphine laughed, the sound like music. You shall have access to everything, my heart. Everything. She kissed him there, in front of her entire household, and the whispers turned to cheers. Not all of them, Thomas noticed. Some faces remained skeptical or disapproving, but enough voices rose in celebration that he felt the acceptance beginning. Dorian approached as the crowd began to disperse. The steward's expression was no longer neutral. Instead, he offered Thomas something that might have been a smile. I misjudged you, human, Dorian said. I thought you were a threat to my lady's reputation. Instead, you may have saved more than her life. You may have saved her soul. Just doing my job, Thomas replied, fixing broken things. She was not broken, Dorian said, merely waiting for the right person to help her remember who she truly was. That night, Seraphine brought Thomas to her private chambers, not for political reasons or stealth, but simply because they wanted to be together. The rooms were beautiful but surprisingly modest, filled with books and art and the personal touches that revealed the woman behind the title. They stood on her balcony, looking out over the crystalline forest as the twin moons rose once more. Seraphine leaned against Thomas, his arms wrapped around her waist. Are you certain about this? She asked softly. Your life will never be simple again. My enemies will become your enemies. You will face prejudice and challenges at every turn. I fixed your power systems in 2 days and caught a saboteur, Thomas said. I think I can handle some political drama. She turned in his arms to face him. I am serious, Thomas. I am offering you my heart, but it comes with complications. Then we'll face them together. He cupped her face in his hands. Seraphine, I spent 30 years on Earth never finding anyone who made me feel the way you do. I'm not walking away from that, because it might be difficult. Difficult is fixing a fusion reactor at 3 a.m. Difficult is recalibrating a star drive while in hyperspace. This is easy. Loving me is easy. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. She kissed him then, deep and passionate, and Thomas knew he had found something worth any challenge the universe could throw at them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were glowing in the moonlight, her skin silver and luminous, his eyes bright with happiness. Stay with me, Seraphine whispered. Tonight and all the nights to come. Forever, Thomas promised. And as they moved together into her chambers, closing the door on the world outside, the garden of whispers below seemed to bloom brighter, as if the flowers themselves were celebrating the joining of two souls who had found each other across the vast distance between worlds. In the days that followed, Thomas would learn the intricate politics of Tavros Prime. He would face those who questioned his presence and win them over with his competence and his obvious devotion to their lady. He would upgrade systems, prevent disasters, and slowly become an indispensable part of House Tavros. But more importantly, he would wake each morning to silver skin and violet eyes, to laughter and passion, and the kind of connection that most beings never found in a lifetime. He would learn Seraphine's people's customs while teaching her about Earth. They would blend their worlds, creating something new and beautiful. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the twin moons hung full in the sky, they would return to the Garden of Whispers, to the place where everything had changed, and remember that the best things in life were worth taking risks for. Love, Thomas learned, was the greatest risk of all, and the greatest reward. The end.